We talked about the EMOM nights, the process of writing, and his own music process. I hope that you are enjoying the VEMOM festival and that you will enjoy this interview. The first thing I want to ask is, do you have the copy of the book with you right now?
Yes, I've got a copy. Here it is. Electronic Music Travels, 392 pages of stories and information from the wonderful world of EMOM. This is like the vinyl of literature. It's
Yes.
a book, you know,
Yeah.
rather than a download of any kind. You actually to have and to hold wherever you go. So, in terms of the book itself, there's 15 chapters from many of the EMOM nights that we've had, including the Amsterdam and the Berlin
Nice.
night. And yeah, there's stories in all of those, all of them. The Manchester night was the first one I had, and that was really interesting because the audience was so lovely there and so supportive, and we had a right eclectic mix of things going on, which really kind of made me think this is a good way to go for music because it just brings people out that are doing different things. So Manchester was great, and that's the first chapter. And then we go to places like Edinburgh, Sheffield, Leicester, all over. Yeah, plenty of stories in there. Unfortunately, not everybody that we know from the EMOM community is included. It's just one of those things. The stories kind of flowed from the chapters I managed to finish. And there's a few nights that I regret kind of missing out, but there's not much
Mm.
you can do. You can't sort of write something for every single event and individual. It's a celebration of the types of things that go on, really. I try to keep it kind of human as well because it's as much about the characters that you meet and come across and the difficulties that happen. You remember in London, I think you were actually there, and this is included in the chapter. There was those two guys who kept coming from upstairs, and they've got some kind of little conga drum or something,
Yes.
and everybody was telling him to shut up. He was absolutely Portuguese guy. He was absolutely hammered.
Yeah.
Managed to get him back upstairs to disappear, and then he reappeared sort of half an hour later,
Yeah.
banging away on the drum at the back of the room. So in
Yeah.
the end, incorporated it into one of the acts at the end. It was such fun. That's what I liked about the London nights. You used to get people from all around Europe, really, and the world.
What were your motivation to start the EMOM nights? Because like that's still quite a big thing to organize. That's a lot of thing to think about, and to do
Yeah.
so many nights and keep going. You must have some like dedication to it that makes it
Yeah,
happen.
I think the dedication came from just enjoying the nights and also enjoying the travel. The travel, going to new places and meeting new people was fantastic. The big motivator, I think, was from starting to get into making electronic music again because I've always been interested in it, but after a sort of acoustic phase, went back to the electronica and just couldn't find anywhere that was a sort of acceptable environment to play in, really. So if you go to your standard open mics, it's mostly guys with guitars. It's usually guys with guitars, acoustic guitars, singer-songwriters. So it's always the same sort of thing. And if you turn up with a bit of electronic kit, a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's nice to have something weird and different," but it's not actually that weird to me. It's
Yeah.
just making music with a different type of instrument. So it came from that, and I'd thought about it for several years, and never got my act together, and finally got my act together in 2017. And Fuel Cafe in Manchester were advertising for events, so I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And the response was amazing. So from there, rather than do it once a month in Manchester, I wanted to take the idea further afield and just start going around the country. And a lot of the people who came to the first EMOM nights that I ran, they started running their own. And that's how the kind of community came out of it then. It took me a while to do something in London because London was quite a tough nut to crack,
Mm. Yeah.
finding a venue. and I was quite lucky and enjoyed being at the Troubadour while we were there. Of course, Chewy Madigan picked up on the London nights and started them in Camberwell, at a great place. It's a jazz club underneath a church. And I
Yeah,
think, it's worth saying that the other thing about the EMOM community is a lot of really talented people out there.
yeah,
Barry, very, very talented guy. Andrew is yourself. And, amongst the community, we've got graphic designers, sound producers, expertise in sound engineering and all sorts, really.
yeah,
It's fantastic. I like that. And I like that sort of individuality as well, that you tend to get with the EMOM side of things. Everybody's got a completely different approach. You could give two people the exact same bit of kit and they'd come out with something
yeah,
completely different. I really like that.
yeah, yeah. You wrote a book about the EMOM night. What's your motivation?
Because I dabble in all the arts. I do quite a bit of drawing and poetry and writing and music, like lots of people do. And actually writing and finishing a book, I think, amongst all the different arts I indulge myself in, is one of the hardest of all. It's sort of 10% inspiration, 90% real hard graft, poring over words, making the time to go through it and through it again. So it's different sort of art form, requires a lot of work. Motivation is just to have a record somehow, I think, of what has happened to me and to the whole process of going different places. It's like a travel log anyway, or going to all these different places and meeting all these wonderful people, and what happens on the nights. And some of it's funny and some of it's tragic and some of it's like very strange. But that's life, isn't it? In the end, it's sort of capturing the essence of music making and why we do it. Why does somebody take their music to a night in the middle of nowhere on a rainy November, to play to sort of 15 people? And also, motivation was around really trying to say something about electronic music, because I think there's a sort of a thinking that electronic music is quite kind of sniffy or elitist in the past, and a bit cliquey. So I wanted to sort of break down those kind of views as well, that it is open. And that was part of the EMOM thing anyway, that it is open to all comers, from all backgrounds, all ages. And then when you've got an opportunity to sort of write about something as interesting as that, I think you've got to take it, really. And I don't know if you was going to ask, Quinton, but the book sales themselves are to fund a vinyl release on the Wera Foxma label. So
Nice.
it'll be a vinyl release. We're going to ask for tracks to be submitted from anybody who's played at the EMOM nights, new tracks, anybody
Nice.
who's played at the EMOM nights, to go onto a piece of vinyl that will be called Electronic Music Travels.
Yeah,
Like, this
that's
book was supposed to come out at the start of the year, but then COVID came along and sort of knocked all my plans sideways, and I couldn't let it go. I had to keep going back to it and picking over it. And Tegan, who is the lady who runs the Sydney EMOM
yep.
nights, she's also really good at editing. So she went through it, edited it, and bounced things back to me too much. So we went from about 500 pages to 392 pages. I mean, amazing how quickly everything goes out of date, especially when you're writing something like this, because there's references to technology in here that at the time of writing were quite fresh, new pieces of kit.
Mm,
And now they seem to be, all over, like teenage engineering and
yeah.
the deluge, those sorts of things.
What are you using these days? You were talking about the Artifon.
Yeah,
What?
the Orber, I've just got hold of that. Um, so I'm using the SHO1A
Oh yeah.
Roland synth still,
Perfect.
and the MC101
I see.
Roland Groove Box.
Nice.
I'm really trying to get to grips with them, because I've had a bit more time to sit down and study them, get my head around how they work, which I think is important. I really like the MC101 though, and I find with Roland, I tend to take to the way they design their stuff, I take to it, quite easily. And then Korg, I tend to sort of get as well. But there's some bits of kit that I just can't get my head around, and I just find some are more intuitive to me as an individual than others. I had Teenage Engineering OP1 a few years ago, and I just couldn't get on with it at all. Really, I just these are all the kind of things that made me really interested in the EMOM process when we first started running the nights, and just how people were doing all these crazy different things with the technologies. The variation is great, and you just you are surprised. I mean, there's always something that happens that makes you think, wow. Early days of the EMOM, I was using a K oscillator, so I had the mini K oscillator and a K oscillator Pro. They were very portable. Sometimes I had a little bit of other technology with me, one of the Critter and Guitari piano mini pianos that they made, and was doing that sort of very much loop-based stuff with poetry and beat poetry. And then I started to turn to doing things with keys and the Roland setups, and was doing more of that sort of last year and into the year before. So I sometimes didn't get a chance to play on my nights because there were so many people wanting to play, but that's fine with me. I also used the Teenage Engineering stuff a lot because that was super portable for trips to London and back. And I wish I'd been on commission with Teenage Engineering at the time, because people were always more interested in the technology that I was using. We're like, well, what's that? Is it like a calculator or a phone app or something? No, it's not. It's this thing. So I like the manufacturing side of what we're involved in as well, because there's a lot of new small manufacturers. There's one in Bristol called Modal. I think they're in Bristol. I like that side of it, that there's kind of small companies starting to do interesting things to create these technologies. That's why I supported the Artifon Orba. That was started off as a Kickstarter thing and is now available. So
we were talking about the process of writing. I just wanted to know, like, did you start writing it when as like the year were going on the EMOM nights, or did you just recall things afterwards?
I started making notes lots of the nights, and tried to write each night up as a chapter pretty much straight away, so that I've got something drafted, but didn't always get to the end of it. So sometimes I'd start and just didn't finish it. So wrote more chapters than are included in the book. But if I could finish them and put them in a sequence and in an order across the book, that's what I planned to do. So I was making notes on the night, making notes when I got back at the end of the night or the next day, just trying to recall some of the details, some of the characters involved, and then put it all together from there. Really, that's kind of the easy bit. That's the fun bit. It's then turning those notes into, a piece of literature that describes what goes on. So I go into things like, well, how did you get the venue? I mean, even, how did you come across, like, how did I get Troubadour to sign up to this? It took a lot of work. It's quite an interesting, people just go to an event and they think, oh, it's happening that night, but actually a lot of work's gone into making the event actually occur. And it can be quite, you can come across some characters that way. So I wanted to include that as well. Different people that are involved in the venues themselves, these small independent venues that are suffering so much now, nearly going out of business. We kind of supported them through the EMOM process, because those were exactly the kind of places we wanted to be. EMOM never really worked in a Weatherspoons or a major kind of pub. It always worked in a back street, independent venue or art centre or,
Yeah.
cooperative. The one in Brighton was at Anarchist kind of bookshop that had got a bar at the back.
What are your advice? What would you say to people who are interested to try organizing event?
Just do it and see what happens. Just, take the plunge. Find a venue that works for you. Make sure you ask questions about, like, do you have to hire a sound engineer? Can you do your own sound engineering? Does the venue charge for hire of the venue? Try and find a venue, obviously, that doesn't have those sorts of costs, and just go for it. And then advertise it like mad. It used to be that you could use Facebook to do that, but Facebook has made it quite difficult to promote events now. And so you've got to use every available opportunity, from virtual online stuff to putting posters up and leaflets in the right kind of places, bookshops and record stores. The old school stuff works pretty good as well, I think. So have that combined approach if you want to get to the audience. You've got to cast the net pretty widely.